Hello, esteemed gentlemen. The harder a person is to read, the longer people tend to watch. There is something strangely fascinating about a man who doesn't seem to be asking the room for anything. He isn't desperately trying to be noticed, yet somehow people notice him. He isn't performing confidence, but people start wondering whether he's confident. He isn't trying to look mysterious, yet somehow he leaves questions behind wherever he goes. And here's the interesting part. People are naturally drawn to uncertainty. When the brain can't quickly predict someone's behavior, it tends to pay closer attention. In other words, sometimes staring isn't admiration at all, it's investigation. A Sigma male can trigger that curiosity in some very unexpected ways. Maybe he doesn't laugh when everyone else does. Maybe he remembers a tiny detail from a conversation 6 months ago. Maybe someone tries to provoke him and gets absolutely nothing in return. Or maybe he simply walks out of a room without saying goodbye to 12 people, 3 cousins, and the guy who somehow became his friend 5 minutes ago. And that's where things get interesting, because the real reason people stare at Sigma males may have very little to do with looks, status, money, or some mythical aura of superiority. It may be the small things they do differently, the social signals they refuse to send, the reactions they don't give, and the parts of themselves they don't immediately explain. Some people become interesting because they reveal everything. Others become interesting because they leave something unresolved. So what exactly are people noticing when their eyes keep drifting toward the man who seems perfectly comfortable doing his own thing? Here are 12 unusual reasons people find themselves staring at Sigma males, and some of them have almost nothing to do with what you think. Number 1. They don't perform for the room. One of the first things people notice about a Sigma male is that he doesn't seem to change personalities depending on who walks through the door. He can be around important people without suddenly becoming overly agreeable. He can be around strangers without desperately trying to impress them. He doesn't appear to be auditioning for approval, and that can be surprisingly noticeable. Most people adjust themselves socially without even realizing it. They laugh a little louder around certain people, speak differently around authority, become more energetic around attractive people, or suddenly become experts when an interesting audience appears. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's normal human behavior. But when someone refuses to play that game, people notice the contrast. The Sigma male may simply remain the same person. He listens when he has something worth hearing, speaks when he has something worth saying, and doesn't manufacture a personality just because there are eyes on him. Ironically, this can make more eyes land on him. People become curious about someone who doesn't appear to need the room's permission to exist comfortably inside it. They may wonder what makes him so unaffected, what he is thinking, or whether he even realizes people are watching. And sometimes, that is exactly the point. The less he performs for attention, the more attention he accidentally receives. Number 2. They sometimes look like they know something nobody else knows. There is a particular kind of expression that makes people look twice. It isn't a grin, a frown, or an obvious display of confidence. It's the look of someone who seems to be processing something that everyone else has missed. A Sigma male can sometimes give off that impression without saying a word. He may notice a strange detail in a conversation, catch a contradiction, or quietly connect 2 things that other people haven't linked together. Instead of immediately announcing what he has noticed, he keeps observing. That silence creates curiosity. People start wondering, what did he notice? Why isn't he reacting? Does he know something I don't? And the funny thing is, he may not actually know anything extraordinary. He could simply be thinking about what he heard while everyone else has already moved on. But because he isn't explaining his thoughts, other people are left to fill in the blanks themselves. This becomes especially noticeable when his reaction comes later. He may suddenly ask one precise question that exposes something everyone overlooked. Or he may make one quiet comment that completely changes the direction of the conversation. Now people are watching him, not because he claimed to be the smartest person in the room, but because he gave them a reason to wonder what was happening behind that silence. Sometimes mystery isn't created by hiding information. It's created by not revealing every thought. Number 3, they don't rush to fill awkward silence. Silence makes many people uncomfortable. The moment a conversation goes quiet, someone usually reaches for a question, checks their phone, cracks a joke, or says something completely unnecessary just to keep the air moving. A Sigma male may not feel that same pressure. If there is nothing worth saying, he can simply remain quiet. He doesn't automatically interpret silence as a problem that needs fixing, and that can make other people strangely aware of him. The interesting part is that silence gives people fewer clues. When someone talks constantly, you can quickly understand their mood, personality, opinions, and intentions. But when they become quiet, the usual information disappears. Now people start wondering, is he bored? Is he thinking? Did I say something wrong? Does he disagree? Why isn't he reacting? That uncertainty can make them pay even closer attention. And sometimes the Sigma male isn't trying to create tension at all. He simply doesn't believe every empty second needs to be filled with noise. He may prefer listening to speaking, observing before responding, or taking a moment to decide whether a conversation deserves his energy. That can be surprisingly powerful, because when someone isn't afraid of silence, other people often become more conscious of their own need to escape it. He says nothing, and somehow everyone else starts thinking about what his silence means. Number 4, their attention can feel selective. One strange thing about a Sigma male is that his attention may not feel evenly distributed. He can sit through an entire conversation looking almost detached, then suddenly become completely focused when someone mentions something that genuinely interests him. That switch can catch people off guard. He isn't necessarily ignoring everyone. He may simply refuse to pretend that every conversation deserves the same level of attention. Small talk might receive a polite response. A pointless argument might receive nothing. But introduce an idea he finds meaningful, and his entire presence can change. He listens carefully. He asks sharper questions. He remembers details. His responses become more deliberate. People notice that difference. It can make them wonder, what makes him interested? Why did that get his attention but not everything else? The curiosity becomes even stronger when his attention isn't easily bought. Compliments don't automatically win it. Popular opinions don't automatically win it. Someone being loud doesn't automatically win it either. There is something unusual about a person whose attention seems to have a filter. And this is where the staring begins. People naturally pay closer attention to someone whose attention they cannot easily capture. They may even start testing it without realizing it, dropping certain comments, mentioning particular subjects, or watching for a reaction. He may not be trying to seem selective at all. He simply isn't handing out his attention like free samples at a supermarket. Number 5, they can leave a conversation without trying to win it. Some conversations are not really conversations. They are quiet competitions disguised as discussions. Someone makes a point, another person challenges it. Then both sides start fighting for the final word. A Sigma male may simply refuse to participate. If someone misunderstands him, he doesn't always feel compelled to correct every detail. If someone tries to provoke him, he may answer briefly and move on. If an argument becomes pointless, he can end the conversation without delivering a dramatic closing speech. That can leave people surprisingly confused. Because many people expect resistance when they apply pressure. They expect an explanation, a defense, an insult, or at least some visible frustration. When none of that arrives, the entire interaction suddenly loses its usual rhythm. And that silence can be more noticeable than an argument. The other person may start wondering, did I get to him? Did he simply not care? Was he holding something back? Sometimes the answer is much simpler. He decided the conversation wasn't worth winning. That's an unusual kind of restraint because walking away can feel like losing when your ego is involved. But refusing to turn every disagreement into a contest is different. It shows that his goal isn't always to prove himself right. And when people realize they can't easily pull him into a pointless battle, they may start watching him more carefully, because they no longer know what will make him engage and what will make him quietly walk away. Number 6, they notice changes. Other people. Ignore. Some people listen to words. Others notice what changes between the words. A Sigma male may pick up on small shifts that most people barely register, a sudden change in someone's tone, a forced laugh, a different choice of words, an unusual pause, or the fact that someone who normally talks freely has suddenly become careful. None of these things proves anything by itself, but noticing them can reveal a habit of paying attention beyond the obvious. And that can make people uncomfortable. Someone may casually change their story, expecting nobody to notice. The Sigma male doesn't necessarily accuse them or announce what he caught. He might simply become quieter and store the information away. That silence can be far more intriguing than confrontation. People start wondering, did he notice that? Sometimes they find out later that he did. This is where the staring becomes interesting. Once someone realizes that another person catches details they thought were invisible, they naturally become more conscious of their own behavior. They begin watching what they say around him, how they say it, and what he might be noticing. He doesn't need to be some human lie detector. That's exaggerated. The real difference is simpler. He may pay attention to patterns instead of isolated moments, and when someone consistently notices the little things, people eventually start wondering what else has escaped their attention but landed on his radar. That curiosity alone can make him difficult to ignore. Number 7. They don't always react when a reaction is expected. One of the easiest ways to attract attention is to respond differently from what everyone expects. A Sigma male may do exactly that without deliberately trying to be interesting. Someone tells a shocking story and everyone reacts dramatically. He pauses. Someone makes a joke at his expense, and instead of becoming defensive, he simply smiles or says nothing. Someone praises him heavily, and rather than soaking up the attention, he gives a simple "thank you" and carries on. That mismatch can make people look twice. Human beings are constantly predicting how others will respond. We expect anger after an insult, excitement after good news, embarrassment after a mistake, and laughter after a joke. When the expected reaction doesn't arrive, our brains naturally search for an explanation. Why didn't he react? That question can be more powerful than the reaction itself. The Sigma male isn't necessarily emotionless. He may feel everything happening around him. He simply doesn't believe every feeling needs to become a public performance. That distinction matters. A person who controls what he displays can become difficult to read, especially in a world where people often reveal their emotions instantly. Others may start watching his face, his posture, his tone, even the timing of his responses, trying to figure out what is actually happening beneath the surface. And ironically, the less he gives away in the moment, the harder people may look for clues. Number 8. They can be socially present without being socially available. A Sigma male can be standing right there, listening to the conversation, laughing occasionally, and still give people the feeling that they haven't really entered his world. That difference is easy to notice. He may be friendly without becoming overly familiar. He can enjoy someone's company without immediately sharing his personal history, private plans, fears, ambitions, or every detail of his life. He doesn't necessarily shut people out. He simply decides how much access each person receives, and that can create curiosity. Most relationships become closer through constant sharing. The more someone reveals, the easier they become to understand. But when a person remains warm while keeping certain parts of himself private, other people have fewer pieces to work with. They start wondering what exists beyond what he has shown them. What is he actually thinking? What does he do when nobody is around? Why doesn't he talk about that part of his life? Why does he seem comfortable keeping some things completely to himself? The interesting part is that he may not even realize he's creating this effect. He isn't necessarily playing hard to get or trying to appear mysterious. He may simply believe that privacy is not the same thing as secrecy, and that distinction can make him unusually interesting. He is present enough to be noticed, but private enough to remain unfinished in other people's minds. Number 9. Their habits can look almost unrelated to their social image. One reason people stare at a Sigma male is that what he does privately may not match the person they think they have figured out publicly. He might appear quiet, serious, and reserved, yet spend his evenings learning how engines work, studying ancient history, writing music, building something with his hands, or obsessing over a subject nobody expected him to care about. That contradiction creates curiosity. People naturally build quick stories about others. Quiet person, probably boring. Serious person, probably predictable. Reserved person, probably has simple interests. Then one unexpected detail destroys the entire picture. Suddenly, there is a question. What else don't I know about him? This is where the Sigma archetype becomes interesting, not because every quiet man secretly has 10 unusual hobbies, but because some people simply refuse to make their personality easy to summarize. Their appearance, social behavior, and private interests may seem like completely different pieces of a puzzle. And people love puzzles. The more surprising the contradiction, the more attention it can attract. A man who looks like he spends all day avoiding people might actually spend hours studying psychology. Someone who barely talks about himself might have an incredibly detailed creative world that he rarely shares. That unexpected depth can make people look again. Sometimes what makes a person fascinating isn't what everyone sees, but how badly the first impression fails to explain the rest of them. Number 10. They can remember tiny details from months ago. There is something oddly powerful about a person who remembers what everyone else has forgotten. A Sigma male may casually hear someone mention a small preference, an unusual opinion, or a random detail about their life. He doesn't make a big deal about it. Months later, he brings it up naturally, and suddenly the other person realizes he actually remembered. That moment can change how people see him. It suggests that his quietness doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't paying attention. He may have been listening far more carefully than anyone realized. Perhaps someone once mentioned their favorite obscure author, a childhood hobby, or a small goal they were working toward. Most people would forget the conversation within days. But when he remembers it much later, people start wondering what else he has stored away. The interesting part is that this doesn't require some extraordinary memory. Often it comes down to genuine attention. When someone isn't busy planning their next sentence, checking their phone, or waiting for their chance to speak, they can actually absorb details. And people notice when they feel remembered. It can make them feel seen, but it can also make them curious. How did he remember something I barely remember telling him? That question can make people watch him differently, because suddenly his silence has a new meaning. Maybe he wasn't disengaged at all. Maybe he was quietly collecting details while everyone else was busy filling the silence. Number 11. They don't advertise every improvement. One of the most attention-grabbing things about a Sigma male is that his biggest changes may arrive without an announcement. He doesn't necessarily tell everyone he's learning a new skill. He doesn't need to post every workout, every business move, every book he finishes, or every personal goal he has set. He can work quietly and let the results eventually speak for themselves. That can make people curious. Most people are used to seeing the process. They watch the updates, hear the plans, follow the struggle, and eventually celebrate the achievement. But when someone disappears into his own work and returns noticeably different, people are left trying to reconstruct what happened while they weren't paying attention. When did he learn that? How long has he been working on this? What else has he been doing? That uncertainty creates attention. The real power isn't secrecy. It's the absence of constant announcements. A person who talks about every improvement can become predictable because everyone knows what they're working toward. Someone who keeps his development private gives people very little information until the change becomes visible. And there's something brutally honest about that approach. Talking about progress feels rewarding, but actual progress requires doing the work after the audience has gone home. The Sigma male may simply prefer that second option. No countdown, no grand announcement, no desperate search for applause, just quiet work, and eventually a result people cannot ignore. Number 12. They may treat high-status and low-status people surprisingly similarly. One of the quickest ways to reveal what a person truly values is to watch how they treat people who cannot give them anything in return. A Sigma male may speak to a security guard with the same basic respect he gives an executive. He can listen to a cleaner, thank a waiter, or have a genuine conversation with someone most people barely acknowledge. Not because he is trying to look humble, but because another person's title doesn't automatically determine their worth to him. That can make people pay attention. Social environments are full of invisible rankings. People become warmer when someone has influence, money, beauty, popularity, or authority. The tone changes, the smiles become bigger. Suddenly everyone remembers how to laugh at a terrible joke. But when one person doesn't dramatically change his behavior based on someone's status, the contrast becomes obvious. People may start wondering what he uses to judge others if it isn't rank. Perhaps it's character, perhaps competence, perhaps simply how someone behaves when nobody important is watching. This doesn't mean treating everyone identically or pretending every person deserves unlimited access. It means basic respect isn't reserved for impressive people. And that can be strangely refreshing, because when someone isn't constantly looking upward for approval, people notice. He isn't necessarily trying to stand outside the social hierarchy. He simply refuses to let someone else's position decide how much basic respect they receive. Conclusion. People don't always stare because someone is the loudest, most attractive, richest, or most powerful person in the room. Sometimes they stare because they can't quite figure out what they're looking at. The Sigma male archetype is interesting for exactly that reason. He may not perform for attention, rush to fill silence, explain himself to everyone, or react exactly when people expect him to. He notices details. He chooses where his attention goes. He can be socially present without revealing everything. He may quietly improve himself, remember things others forgot, and treat people according to character rather than status. None of this makes him superior to everyone else. That's where the fantasy needs to end. The real attraction is the unanswered question. When someone's behavior doesn't fit the usual social script, people become curious. They watch a little longer. They search for clues. They try to understand the person behind the behavior. And sometimes the more they watch, the less certain they become. That's the irony. The Sigma male may not be trying to become fascinating at all. He may simply be comfortable enough with himself that he doesn't constantly manage how other people perceive him. And in a world where almost everyone is broadcasting something, a person who doesn't feel the need to broadcast everything can become remarkably difficult to ignore. If this video gave you a fresh perspective, don't just watch and disappear into the shadows like a professional mystery character. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who would appreciate this kind of psychology. And most importantly, keep watching closely, because sometimes the most interesting things about a person are the things they never thought anyone noticed.